My name is Meghan Fitz-James. I'd like to posit that Aishopan Nurgayev, the star of the documentary called The Eagle Huntress, deserves to be the star she is for far more reasons than the documentary and the girl power film industry are ready to recognize. The following is my opinion. The interviewer states that Asher Svidinsky, quote, came across or found a young girl training and hunting with an eagle. Svidinsky does not disagree with this statement and says he, quote, met her, still in the learning process, I guess.
And until now, it's been a male job, a male pursuit to train the eagles and to hunt with them, but you came across a girl, a young woman, training.
Yes, Kazakh tradition, it is male occupation to be an eagle hunters, especially due to the cold weather of Mongolia and Kazakhstan. In the winter can be down to -40. And I met Ashulpan, which is a young, still in learning process, I guess, of being an eagle huntress.
Tell us about the young woman you found, training and hunting with the eagles.
Her name was Ashulpan. I photographed her in Bayan Ulgi province, which is the westernest province of Mongolia. And she's a daughter of a very appreciated eagle hunter in the province. And I remember when I got there, she wasn't home, and I saw a picture of her on the wall, and I said, maybe she's not right, maybe she's just a bit off. But then we went to her school and picked her up, and she was always smiling, always really nice, and a little bit shy, of course. And it was amazing seeing her with the eagle. She didn't have a lot of experience, but I always compared her to other boys her age. She was 13, and I shot about 5 boys that time, also training with the eagle. And she was so much comfortable with an eagle, so much at ease with him.
And what does her advancement to an eagle hunter say about the changing status of women in Mongolia?
It says a lot, actually. I think it's around 60 or 70% of educated people in Mongolia are women. If you look at Mongolian history, throughout their history, it wasn't a very chauvinist or feminist culture. It was actually pretty even between men and women. If you look at Genghis Khan time, you can see that he left a lot of parts of the empire to his daughters. After this project, I'm planning to come back there and see if she's already a hunter, and maybe I can meet her in the Eagle Festival.
The interviewer asks Svidinsky, what did you feel when you discovered this young girl training her eagle? Svidinsky said it was a matter of falling from one kid to another, and that his idea of trying to photograph an eagle huntress in mind, he had the support of his guide, and, quote, we just found her.
What did you feel when you discovered this young girl training her eagle?
It was amazing. The entire project was done in a way of me falling from one kid to the other. And once I had in my mind the idea of trying to photograph an eagle huntress, I had an amazing support from my guide, actually, who really liked the project. And after a couple of search through different families, we just found her.
A few months earlier, he explained and told the truth to a Mongolian TV interviewer. And during this interview, he said that his photos were a part of a, quote, mix between a documentary and art project. He said he posed a question to himself, quote, why not have an eagle huntress? He explained he wanted to show a picture of the future, something, quote, a little different, something more feminist, more strong. Svidinsky said his guide was enthusiastic about the project. He said his photos were of Aishopan, quote, hunting and trying to work with an eagle. And he said and explained that his art/doc project was explained to the father of the girl, and that he asked the father, would you ever consider training her, making her a real eagle huntress? And the father said he would, if she asked him to do so.
In the end of this shoot, I said, all right, I have enough time, I have enough budget to shoot one more kid. What do I want to do? And I was thinking about, I can have another kid who's training, or in the mid-section, maybe another hunter who's a little bit older. And then I was thinking, well, the entire project is actually talking about what will be the future of Eagle Hunters in the next 5 years. And I thought, well, because this project is a mix between a documentary to an art project, I said, all right, I want to have my own perspective. What would I like to see in 5 years? And I was thinking about it a lot, and I said, why not have an Eagle Huntress?
Yeah.
Because I think that's going to be a really interesting way to look at it. To change the direction for a modern style, more feminist, more strong. And we went looking for it. And we found a girl named Shulpan, who was 13 years old. She was a girl, yeah. And she was the daughter of an eagle hunter. Told him about the idea, we told him about the project, and he was really into it, he was really excited. We shot her a couple of days in different mountaintops, hunting and trying to work with an eagle. And for me it was really amazing, because if I compare her to the first kid we shot, which is also 13 years old and also just starting his training, she was a lot more comfortable with the eagle. She wasn't scared of petting him and working with him. And for me it was really seeing a dream come true. Like, I had that in mind, I would love to see that and would love to photograph it and tell this. And actually seeing it for me was like a really strong experience. And for me the summary of the entire project was just on the last 20 minutes before we had to go back. I sat down with the father and the guide, like only us, and I wanted to ask him 2 questions. I said, can I ask you 2 questions, but please just answer sincerely. So sure. How was it for you to see your daughter with the Kazakh costume and the eagle and calling and the mountains?
Like a real eagle huntress,
Like
yeah.
a real eagle huntress. And he said, oh, it was good. All right, and seriously, would you ever consider training her? Would you ever consider making her a real eagle huntress? And I was expecting a funny maybe or a honest no. And his answer was really important for me, because he thought about it for a couple of minutes and then he said, until 2 years ago, my oldest son was the successor of the culture. He was the one who was supposed to carry it on. And he went to the army, he became an officer, so he probably won't be back to do that. And I've been thinking about training her for a very long time now. The thing is, I'll never offer it to her unless she asks for it, because it should come from her. And for me, that was like the answer for the project.
About 9 months later, Asher Svidensky again repeated this message to the TEDxUB audience. He said he self-posed the question, quote, if I count 10 years from now, what would I like to see here? He said he, quote, came to this idea of having an eagle huntress, and he elaborated that his enthusiastic guide helped him by identifying his good friend who had a daughter of, quote, roughly the right age. When Asher Svidensky photographed Aishopan, he was excited to see his vision of the future visualized. He said he asked the father what it was like to see his daughter in Kazakh costume and sending an eagle and calling the eagle back. He said the father said it was good to see. And he elaborated that he asked the father whether he would consider training her and making her, quote, Mongolia's first eagle huntress in more than 1,000 years. He said the father had already been meaning to train her, but that he would never do so unless she herself asked him to do so.
This connection inspires me to feel like I'm doing something right. After I shot Bachberger, I knew I had enough time, budget, and energy to shoot one more kid, the last kid of the project. And yet again, I wanted to have a new approach, something a little different. And because this project is dealing with the question, what will be the future of this tradition in the modern age, I started thinking, why not I, as the storyteller, will give my answer? When I come 10 years from now, what would I like to see here? And I came to this idea of having an eagle huntress. And I started asking people if they heard of something or knew of something, and everywhere I go, I had shut doors and joh, 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 which means no in Kazakh. Luckily for me, as part of my process, I always keep the people involved, the people I'm photographing involved in what I do. This is, by the way, our mountain office, and those are 2 hunters I shot. And in the middle stands my guide, who was really enthusiastic with my project. And the second he heard I was trying to find Eagle Huntress, he made a couple of phone calls. He told me, listen, a good friend of mine is a hunter. He has a daughter roughly in the right age. Why don't we give it a go? And we did. And we went to their house and we showed them the images. We talked to them about the project, and they were actually really excited to be a part of it. And the next day was amazing. I don't know how to describe this feeling of being an artist. Have something in the back of your mind as a possibility that you would like to see, and then have it visualized in front of you. When I shot Eshel Pan, 13-year-old Eshel Pan, I always compared her to the other boys I photographed, noticing that although she was as young as they were and as unexperienced as most of them, she was so much more confident, comfortable with an eagle. At that time, I had a different summary for this project. It was about 15 minutes before we had to leave. All our bags were already in the car, and I asked to talk to her dad in person. We went aside and I asked him 2 questions and have a sincere answer. The first question was, how is it for you to see your daughter like this, with a Kazakh hat, clothing, on the mountains, sending the eagle away and calling back? He said, oh, it was good, it was good. All right. And seriously, would you ever consider training her? Making her Mongolia's first eagle huntress in more than 1,000 years? And I was expecting a funny maybe or an honest no, but his answer at the time summarized the project for me when he replied, until 2 years ago, my eldest son was my successor. I'm an eagle hunter, my dad is an eagle hunter, our entire family has been eagle hunters for hundreds of years. But he was drafted to the army 2 years ago and became an officer, so he probably won't be back for our tradition. And for a few months, I've been actually meaning to train her, but I would never do it unless she asked me to. Being a huntress, being a successor for a tradition, means fighting for it, means being passionate for it.
Asher Svidenski started working with the documentary filmmaker Otto Bell soon after the BBC story came out. In fact, he flew back to Mongolia together with Otto Bell to introduce Otto Bell to the family. Svidenski became Bell's fixer, helper, and co-producer. And yet this is how the documentary filmmaker describes what led up to filmmaking.
Well, Otto, take us back to the very beginning, because it's a fascinating story how, on a whim, you kind of decided to fly to Mongolia and take a chance on filming this. Take us back to the very beginning and what inspired you to go for this.
Asher Pan inspired me. I saw a photograph on the BBC by a young Israeli photographer called Asher Svidenski, and he had stumbled across Asher Pan while sort of going walkabout after his national service. It was posted online on the BBC, and I was lucky enough to see it the day that it came out. It was a series of photos by this young Israeli photographer called Asher Svidenski, kind of an adventurous guy. He was traveling through the Altai Mountains, and he stumbled upon Asher Pan. I was inspired by a set of photographs by a young Israeli photographer called Asher Svidenski. And he had stumbled upon Asher Pan, the eagle huntress, training with her father's eagle.
Otto, let's start with you. How on earth did this story come to you? I mean, usually we have documentary filmmakers up here and they're like, oh, I read an article about it in the newspaper, so I went to Wisconsin and I started shooting or something. How did this story come to you?
Not too dissimilar, just a bit further than Wisconsin. I saw a photograph on the BBC. The first day that it came out, and I was sitting in my cube at work, and I stood up and I thought, gosh, there's got to be a film. It was a picture of Asher Pan training with her father's eagle against the Altai Mountains of northwest Mongolia, and it was just so, it was like a painting. It looked so beautiful.
First of all, congratulations to this amazing, fantastic documentary called The Eagle Huntress. I'm just curious, how did you discover the story, and what inspired you to decide to make this film?
It was a photograph of Ashurpan that inspired me to make the film. I was lucky enough to see a photo essay on the BBC by a Israeli photographer called Asher Svidinsky, and he had stumbled upon Ashurpan in the Altai Mountains.
I was going to say, I thought from the picture that maybe she had already won the competition and been out hunting, but you filmed it live. She hadn't already won it.
That's right. This picture is her training with her father's eagle.
So why did this picture suddenly come out to the world rather than her just being stuck in Mongolia doing everything? How did you find out about her?
This young Israeli photographer, Asher Svidinsky, he had just wrapped up his national service in the army and was kind of on a walkabout through Mongolia, and he was taking photos of all the kind of the next generation of eagle hunters, and he stumbled upon her training with her father's eagle.
As can be heard, descriptions given by Asher Svidinsky and Otto Bell are inconsistent and contradictory, and they serve to cover up the truth about what led up to Ashurpan becoming involved in the filming. Undeniably, there were outside influences involved in Ashurpan's decision to ask to be trained. To the BBC, Svidinsky did not speak about the fact that Ashurpan's father had not yet been asked by her to train her at the time of the photo shoot, nor did he disclose that the photo of her was a so-called picture of the future in terms of what an eagle huntress would look like. The filmmaker Otto Bell has not told the truth in that he has publicly described Svidinsky as having been on a walkabout after army service when he stumbled upon Ashurpan and then photographed her. He says that the photos of Ashurpan were of her training and hunting with her father's eagle, which is not true. He suggests that Ashurpan was fully engaged in an apprenticeship and had already asked her father to train her to be a real eagle hunter, which is also not true. Interestingly, Bell said that he was not sure whether the family would agree to the filming, and this is despite the father having already spoken of his enthusiasm for the idea of his daughter becoming Mongolia's first eagle huntress. With all of this in mind, I can only wonder if Ashurpan in the interim was asked to ask for the training to happen, and by whom. All that we consumers know is that Ashurpan started being filmed by Bell, but we do not know exactly what bridged that gap between enthusiastic interest on the part of the father to engagement of Ashurpan in the training and the decision for her to ask to be trained. This does not mean to say that Ashurpan would not have been a natural choice, but it does raise a number of issues as to what would have tipped the balance for her to ask her father to train her.
I made the film with a compass, not with a map.
If Otto Bell was not using a map and instead just a compass in his filmmaking process, it is very clear that someone was holding the map in this documentary process. Asher Svidinsky. Noting that the two men worked closely together, it appears that they have together decided to promote the idea that Ashurpan was merely stumbled upon or found or come across as an already engaged apprenticing eagle huntress who had already asked her father if he would train her. Otto Bell in particular does not mention the art mixed with documentary project recruitment process of Ashurpan, and has never maintained his documentary to be a manifestation or extension of Svidinsky's art/doc project. It is clear that the father and Ashurpan do not speak about Asher Svidinsky's next generation art/doc project and Asher Svidinsky's approach to the father to ask if he would consider training Ashurpan.
What made you want to train your daughter so much?
Sizde осылай қыз балаңызды өз балаңызды болуңыз деп осыған үйретуге бір күшті өнерге үйретуге не итермеледі? Ал енді мынау біздің ата дәстүр салтымыздан қалған
мына Алтай әлемде Алтай тауы деген тау бар, оның ішінде Монғолия деген ел бар. Монғолияның ішінде қазақ дейтін кішкене ұлт бар. Сол қазақтың ұлтының жалғыз төл өнері мына бүркіт. Сол бүркітті енді дүние жүзіне бізге паш етуге біздің төл өнерімізді мен енді осы Тұзка баламды Айшолпанды ұрпақтан ұрпаққа жалғастыру үшін осыны соған тәрбиеледім.
Yes, I trained my daughter to continue this tradition. This tradition is existed about for 2,000 years, and before that, I didn't know that it will become like this, and it will show us that there is a Altai Mountains in Mongolia, and around that Altai Mountain exists Kazakh nation that we are, and during that time, I didn't think about that, but now we are very proud that film shows everything in all over the world.
On February 6, 2017, an article by BBC News called "Is the Eagle Huntress Really a Documentary?" was uploaded onto the internet. Aishulpan was quoted to have said, "I started to train when I was 10 years old, going into the mountains with my dad," she told BBC, while passing through Ulaanbaatar recently. Quote, "I told my dad that I wanted to become an eagle huntress." End quote. That was in 2011, 2 or 3 years before Svidinsky arrived on the scene. And she wasn't just training with eagles, she was already hunting too, she says. In Svidinsky's blog, he notes, quote, "I was amazed by her comfort and ease as she began handling the grand eagle for the first time in her life." End quote. Producer Stacey Reese tells a conflicting story on how Aishulpan came to be asking her father to train her. Listen to the following 2 clips. As you can see, the producer says in one clip that Aishulpan asked and asked and asked her father and was persistent to have him agreeable to training her. In the second clip, you'll hear the producer say that the father decided to train his daughter simply because he saw a natural ability in her. In neither of these versions of the story, as told by the producer, is the truth told, in so much as there's no mention made of Asher Svidinsky's art mixed with documentary project, his approach to the father to ask the father whether he would consider training his daughter, or any mention whatsoever of that recruitment process.
And how did this father, how is it that did he think in a modern way and say, or did he just not have a son? I don't know.
He has a son. He has a son, and it was just, and his son.
He's evolved.
And he taught his son. He taught his son how to eagle hunt. But yeah, he is evolved.
His
He's
daughter,
evolved.
Yeah, I mean, Aishulpan really, really wanted to learn, and you'll see this in the film where she's out doing chores with him and working with him and prefers to be outside with him, and is a real tomboy.
She's a total tomboy.
Yeah.
And she kept asking and asking and asking and was persistent.
So, in terms of Aishulpan's dad, who is just such a hero in the film, just for being so open-minded and such a good dad, I'm wondering, Stacey, I understand that this role in their Mongolian culture is a very, being an eagle hunter was such a manly duty and has passed from father to son. But how do you think in the film her relationship with her dad, like what's going on there, and why is he so open-minded and willing to let her do this? And does he take any backlash from his friends in the community?
He's a really incredible person, and I think for me what drew me to this story, was so inspiring to me,
was this strong family that she comes from and the foundation that they provide for her to be able to achieve her dreams. And I think that's a theme that everyone can relate to. And, you know, I've spoken to him about, you know, how did he decide to train her and to make this decision that really no one in his community had done before, and was very rare for a father to teach a daughter how to do this, since it is a custom that was traditionally handed down from father to son. And he said that she was so natural with his eagle, and that watching her interact with the eagle, and you see her in the photographs where she's hugging the eagle, and she's so, in the film, she's so comfortable with the eagle. He said seeing how she interacted with his bird, he couldn't say no to her. He felt like he had to, you know, allow her to have this opportunity and to train her, because it was just so natural between the relationship between her and the animal.
Yeah.
It is my opinion, in conclusion, that for this film to be truly considered a true life coming-of-age documentary, then Asher Svidinsky's role, his pivotal role, in approaching Aisholpan's father and asking whether the father would train Aisholpan, should have been included in the story itself. Pretending that there were no outside influences leading up to Aisholpan's engagement in the training to be an eagle huntress, and that hers was a completely uninfluenced, natural and naturally timed start, is to cover up the facts, and it exposes the lack of ethics involved in the making and marketing of this film. Especially, this is true in so much as the family appear to be expected to cover up these facts themselves and toe the line of the filmmaker and how he's telling things happened. It is my opinion that this should be a correctable event, and hopefully the family will be apprised of the existence of these two other videos. It is not known to me as to whether or not they are aware of these other videos, and or whether they have decided on their own to make a decision not to speak about Asher Svidinsky's approach to the father. Please note, I do not speak on behalf of Aisholpan or her father. The issue I have is with the ethical filmmaking process and how the film has been being marketed in the media and marketing areas. If you disagree with my opinion, of course, it is your expression of disagreement, and I have no say over that. I do, however, hope that you see that there is a large discrepancy about what has really happened in terms of the filmmaking process and about how the filmmaker is talking about how things happened for Aisholpan in her true life story. I'm going to reiterate my feeling with regards to Aisholpan Nurgaev. Aisholpan, when I met her, was a very quiet, very humble, and obviously intelligent and enthusiastic young woman. The fact of the matter, from my understanding, is that she strove hard to engage in the filmmaking process and has subsequently also striven hard to prove herself in her community as a capable eagle huntress. In that regard, I believe that overall, and despite the film and the filmmaking process, and despite everything to do with the media marketing, Aisholpan Nurgaev deserves to be the star she is for more and far more reasons than the documentary and the girl power film industry are ready to recognize. In conclusion, I believe some pointed questions should be asked of the filmmaker and his co-producer /fixer /helper Svidinsky and of Stacey Rees, as I believe it is important that the discrepancies be explored to get to the truth in such a way that Aisholpan's true life story is truthfully told and not in a revisionist manner. After I originally published this video, Asher Svidinsky, on February 18th, published a YouTube video which he entitled The Full Story Behind the Eagle Huntress Image. He did so to describe the backstory and technical photographic decisions involved in the iconic images of Aisholpan that he created. I expected with such an all-encompassing title, I would again hear Svidenski describe his recruitment process the way he did so in the TEDxUB talk and the TV Mongolia interview that you heard earlier. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Svidenski himself wanted to clarify that his photography was not a matter of, quote, stumbling upon this magical scene, but was the result of weeks of hard work and challenges.
This image wasn't made simply by walking around and stumbling upon this magical scene. This image is a direct result of weeks and weeks of hard work and challenges that were leading up to it.
In his description of the original idea, Svidenski left out the envisioning quality of his photos of Aisholpan as he previously described them in the TEDxUB talk and the TV Mongolia interview clips shown earlier. Remembering that he noted he was seeking to photograph his vision of what he would like to see in 5 to 10 years. Instead, his description of what he was attempting to achieve with his photos was simply put as, quote, a new angle. He did not mention that he was engaging in a mix between an art and documentary project to show something, quote, more feminist, more strong. Again, just simply a new angle.
By the time I was getting closer to photographing the iconic image of the Eagle Huntress, I had already photographed other young Eagle Hunters for the project. Kids like Irka Bulan, who was still in the early stages of training with his dad, something that was very important to integrate into the story and images. And Bach Birgen, who was the youngest Eagle Hunter in the province at that time, and in my eyes represented the first hunter of his generation. After that, I knew I had just enough time and budget to find the last successor for the project. And I was hoping to find a new angle for the story. This is how the idea to find an Eagle Huntress came about.
Asher Svidenski again suggests that Aisholpan was handling or learning to handle her father's eagle for the very first time during the photo shoot, in that he remarks that Agalai is showing Aisholpan how to hold the eagle.
Looking at those images now, I quite like them. You can see how Aisholpan's father is teaching her how to hold the eagle.
And lastly, Asher Svidenski reiterates how his guide helped him to identify a candidate for his project. Svidenski indicated he felt lucky that after describing his project to the family that they agreed to participate. However, in his description, Svidenski did not say anything in detail about how he discussed with Aisholpan's father what it felt like to see his daughter in Kazakh costume sending and calling an eagle, and how his next step was to ask the father whether he would consider training her to be a real eagle hunter, or how Aisholpan's father reacted by saying he would if she asked him to do so.
In this particular case of the Eagle Huntress, it was my guide who put us on the right direction. He introduced me to one of his closest friends, who on top of being a famous eagle hunter, also happened to be Aisholpan's father. Later that night, we sat down together and I told them about the project I was working on. Luckily for me, they agreed to be a part of the project and I was invited to join an eagle hunting training session the next day.
In that sense, Svidenski's so-called full story behind the Eagle Huntress image is not as full or complete or explanatory as would be useful for consumers of the Eagle Huntress documentary to judge what his true art/doc recruitment process entailed. Asher Svidenski also does not make mention of his involvement as a co-producer for the documentary film. And this is overall quite unfortunate in so much as this YouTube released by Svidenski will likely be held as the widest overall reach to his online fans and those who stumble upon this video. Again, I thank you for your time. I thought I would use this update to make sure that it was as updated as it can be, and this new addendum to my video has been added on the week of March 6th. Thank you for your time. My previous conclusion holds.